You don't really know what someone feels for you until you stop being the one who keeps the connection alive. Because when you're the one always reaching out, always checking in, always keeping the bond from fading, you're not seeing how much they care. You're seeing how much you care. And sometimes that masks the truth, not because they don't feel anything, but because they never had to show it. You carried the emotional weight. You carried the closeness. You carried the bridge between you. So when you stop reaching out, things shift. Not dramatically at first, not loud, not obvious, but in the quiet moments, in the space, in the silence, in the absence of your effort. That's where their real feelings start to surface. Not in the "I miss you" texts, not in the explanations, not in the apologies, not in the performance, but in their behaviors. Do they drift away like nothing was there? Or do they suddenly notice the emptiness where your energy used to be? Do they finally ask how you are? Or do they disappear and pretend they never needed you? Do they reach out? Or do they wait, hoping you'll break first? You stopping isn't just silence. It's a mirror. It reflects everything they've been hiding, even from themselves. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes it's not that they don't care. Sometimes they just didn't have to. Your effort was their comfort zone. Your presence was their safety net. Your consistency was their emotional breathing room. They could take you for granted, not because they wanted to, but because they never had. To confront the fear of losing you. Not really, not fully, not in a way that shook them. But when you stop reaching out, their mind starts racing. Did I do something wrong? Why aren't they texting first? Are they moving on? Were they serious the whole time? And I didn't see it? What if someone else has their attention now? Your silence becomes pressure. Your distance becomes clarity. Your absence becomes the truth. And suddenly, they're forced to face what they avoided. Losing you isn't hypothetical anymore. It's happening. And here's the revelation you learn. Only through experience. People show their priorities more clearly in your absence than in your presence. Look at what shifts. Do they send memes? Do they check your stories? Do they suddenly find reasons to talk to you? Do they bring up memories? Do they ask questions with emotional depth instead of convenience? Or do they stay unbothered, cold, passive, detached, moving on like your heart never touched theirs? Your silence doesn't create their character. It exposes it. And this is where your strength comes in. Because reaching out is easy. Filling the silence is instinctual. Ending the distance feels safe. But holding your energy, not chasing, not fixing, not over-explaining, not rescuing the connection, that's self-respect. That's emotional boundaries. That's healing. The moment you stop reaching out, you finally see the truth. Who misses you? And who just enjoyed the convenience of you? Who values your heart? And who only valued the access? Who was invested emotionally? And who was invested situationally? And here's the part that hurts. Sometimes the people you cared about the most care only when you stop. Not because they're manipulative, not because they're evil, but because they weren't emotionally awake enough to appreciate you while they had you. Some people don't understand connection. They understand loss. Some don't love deeply. They love when it's threatened. Some don't open up. They panic when you're no longer there. Your silence isn't punishment. It's revelation. It shows them you don't owe your heart to someone who doesn't hold it properly. You don't chase what doesn't choose you back. You don't keep giving when someone never reciprocates. Your absence can be the wake-up call they never expected, and the closure you never had the words for. Because once you stop reaching out, you learn whether this connection was mutual or one-sided, and they learn what it feels like to miss you for real, Not hypothetically, not someday, not in theory, but now, in a world that takes emotions too lightly. Your quiet withdrawal becomes their loudest lesson. They don't get to say you didn't care. You cared loudly, honestly, fully. But now it's time for them to show theirs. Because if they want you in their life, they'll have to reach back. Not with convenience, not with crumbs, not with timing that suits them, but with effort, with initiative, with vulnerability, with clarity. And if they never do, that silence, too, is an answer. But here's where things get real. When you stop reaching out, the story doesn't end. It begins. Because distance doesn't just reveal their feelings, it reveals yours too. It forces you to see what you were holding on to. And what was holding on to you? Sometimes you realize you weren't in love with the person. You were in love with the hope, with the potential, with the emotional fantasy of who they could be if they finally matched your energy. You weren't just maintaining a connection, you were maintaining a dream. And when you step back, your mind starts to separate emotional truth from emotional longing. You start to realize you weren't always choosing them. Sometimes you were choosing not to feel alone. You weren't always protecting the bond. Sometimes you were protecting your fear of losing it. You weren't always fighting for love. Sometimes you were fighting for closure. And when you stop reaching out, your clarity returns. You can finally ask yourself, was I loving them? Or was I trying to convince them to love me? Those are two different relationships. Because love given freely is beautiful. Love given out of fear becomes exhaustion. And that exhaustion is what silence reveals. Not just in them, but in you. You start to feel the weight of all the times you apologized first, all the times you softened your tone, all the times you reached out after arguments, all the times you swallowed your needs so you wouldn't push them away, all the times you waited for them to open up while you carried the emotional labor alone. Silence shows you what your heart put up with. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You start to understand that love shouldn't feel like constant emotional negotiation. It shouldn't feel like proving your value over and over. It shouldn't feel like being grateful for crumbs. Love should choose you back, naturally, consistently, without needing to be convinced. And that's the shift. When you stop reaching out, you stop begging emotionally. You stop auditioning. You stop proving yourself. You stop performing closeness. You start receiving information instead of forcing outcomes. Now it's their turn. Their turn to text first. Their turn to ask how you're doing. Their turn to show up. Their turn to invest. Their turn to care. Because if someone wants you, they won't let silence last forever. But if they don't, the silence will stretch and stretch and stretch, not because they're malicious, but because their emotional world never included you deeply enough. And that realization can be painful, but also liberating, because now you're not stuck in limbo. Now you're not waiting. Now you're not guessing. You're observing. And here comes another truth people don't like to admit. Sometimes they notice your distance, but they wait to see if you'll break first. Not because they don't care, but because vulnerability scares them. They want you to open the door, so they don't have to be the one who risks rejection. They want access to your heart, without taking accountability for theirs. They want you to be emotionally bold, so they can stay emotionally safe. And your silence disrupts that pattern. It puts the emotional responsibility back where it belongs, in balance. But here's the real test. If they reach out now, is it out of love or out of fear of losing their comfort? Some people miss your presence. Others miss your attention. Some miss your heart. Others miss your validation. Some miss the connection. Others miss the control. Your silence doesn't just make them react. It reveals why they react. You start seeing patterns. Do they come back emotionally honest or emotionally vague? Do they ask how you really feel? Or do they send a WID at midnight? Do they want to talk? Or do they want access? Not every return is reconciliation. Some returns are ego. Some returns are boredom. Some returns are loneliness. Some returns are fear of seeing you move on. Silence helps you separate who misses you from who misses what you gave them. And here's something even deeper. When you stop reaching out, you stop being emotionally predictable. You stop being the person they assumed would always be there. And that shift forces them to make a choice. Fight for the connection or let it die. Both answers are closure. You're no longer stuck wondering. You're no longer stuck imagining what they feel. You're no longer emotionally suspended. You finally see reality. And sometimes, yes, they realize your absence hurts. Not instantly, not overnight. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months. People don't process loss the same way. Some feel the void immediately. Some feel it when they see someone else value you. Some feel it when a new person doesn't treat them the way you did. Some feel it when life slows down and memories hit harder. Some feel it only after they've healed enough to understand what you were. But eventually, if the connection was real, they feel it, not just in thoughts, not just in nostalgia, but in the ache of realizing they pushed away someone who showed up for them. And that's where the story shifts. You go from being the person chasing closure to being the one they regret losing. Not because you punished them, not because you played games, not because you withdrew to manipulate, but because for the first time, they're forced to imagine life without your presence. And that hits different because once they feel the loss, they don't just miss your messages, they miss the version of themselves they were when you cared. You made them feel safe, seen, chosen, important. When that disappears, their heart wakes up in ways their mind resisted, and they realize love wasn't suffocating, it was saving them. They just couldn't see it while they had it. Distance becomes their clarity, silence becomes their teacher, and for you, it becomes your freedom. But here's the part most people never talk about. When their true feelings surface, it doesn't always look like a confession. Sometimes it looks like hesitation. Sometimes it looks like confusion. Sometimes it looks like them getting closer, but not knowing how to say why. Not everyone can articulate their emotions. Not everyone grew up in environments where feelings were safe. Not everyone knows how to love in a way that feels secure. So when you stop reaching out, their reaction won't always be smooth. It won't always be romantic. It won't always be mature. Sometimes it comes out sideways. They watch your stories more. They reply to random posts. They ask indirect questions. They mention things that seem irrelevant. They try to recreate casual conversations. It's not random. It's their way of saying, I miss you, but I don't know how to say it directly. For someone emotionally guarded, that is vulnerability. But again, not everyone responds that way. Some people withdraw even more. Why? Because silence forces them to confront what they've been avoiding. Feelings require responsibility. Responsibility requires honesty. Honesty requires risk. And risk is terrifying for people who have been hurt or who fear rejection more than they value connection. So instead of reaching out, they shut down, not because they don't care, but because caring exposes them. To love someone, you have to put something of yourself on the line. Your pride, your ego, your fear, your comfort, your walls. And some people aren't ready to pay that price. They'd rather lose the relationship than lose control. So if you stop reaching out and they disappear, it doesn't always mean you meant nothing. It might mean you meant too much. But here's what matters. More than why they disappear. You finally see what they're capable of in love. Not in theory, not in potential, but in action. Because emotional potential is not the same as emotional readiness. Someone can love you without being ready to love you. Someone can feel deeply without knowing how to express it. Someone can value you without knowing how to show up for you. And sometimes that's the most heartbreaking truth of all. They didn't fail you because they didn't feel. They failed you because they didn't act. Feelings mean nothing without behavior. Connection means nothing without effort. Love means nothing without expression. You stopping isn't abandonment. It's alignment. It aligns you with people who match your effort. It aligns you with love. That doesn't require chasing. It aligns you with relationships, where emotional labor is mutual. Now let's talk about you again. Because stopping isn't just about seeing how they respond. It's about seeing who you become. Without the weight of carrying everything alone, you start to feel lighter, more grounded, more self-aware. You realize you were pouring emotional energy into someone who barely poured any back. You realize you were holding space for someone who rarely held space for you. You realize your heart was available to someone whose heart was guarded. And once you see that imbalance, you start making different decisions. You stop texting first. You stop explaining your feelings to someone who doesn't ask. You stop rearranging your life to fit theirs. You stop excusing their emotional absence. You stop hoping they'll finally wake up. Instead, you start valuing your presence. You start noticing who reaches out, who checks on you, who listens to you, who stays consistent, who asks deeper questions, who makes time, not excuses. The moment you stop reaching out, you shift from pursuing love to receiving clarity, and that clarity changes everything. You don't crave the same things anymore. You don't attach to the same patterns. You don't romanticize inconsistency. Your standards rise, not in a prideful way, in a powerful way. You start wanting depth, presence, reciprocity, emotional safety, someone who sees you without needing a wake-up call. And here's the irony. When you reach that level of self-respect, that's often when the person you stepped back from finally realizes what they lost. Because now, you're not waiting. You're not lingering. You're not emotionally available by default. Your absence becomes permanent, not out of anger, but out of growth. And that hits differently, because they don't just miss your presence. They miss the version of themselves they could only access when you were there. You softened them. You brought warmth. You made connection safe. You made vulnerability feel less scary. Now they're left with their defenses, their pride, their fear, and no one bridging the emotional gap. That's when the regret sinks in. Not when you leave, but when they realize you're not coming back the same. That's when they replay conversations, rethink decisions, reevaluate priorities, question why they pushed you away. And here's the emotional twist. Sometimes they finally show up, right after you've healed enough to not need them anymore. Not out of bad timing, but because growth is uneven. You healed faster. You faced yourself sooner. You accepted the truth earlier. They needed the silence to feel what you felt while you were present. And now they finally understand. But you're not the same person, waiting to be understood. That doesn't mean you reject them. It doesn't mean you close the door. It doesn't mean you hold a grudge. It just means the power dynamic has shifted. You're no longer asking, "What do I mean to them?" Now they're asking, "What happened to the person who used to need me?" And the answer is simple. You didn't stop caring. You stopped overgiving. You didn't stop loving. You stopped chasing. You didn't let go of them. You let go of the version of you who accepted less. Your silence became your evolution. Your distance became your healing. Your absence became your power. And if they want to be part of your life now, they'll have to meet you where you are, not where you were. But here's where everything shifts. When you stop reaching out, and they finally feel the emptiness you left behind, a new question rises. What do you do when they come back? Because silence doesn't just reveal their feelings, it reveals your growth. And growth gives you options you didn't have before. You don't have to run back. You don't have to shut the door. You don't have to pick up where things stopped. You can choose the version of the relationship that honors who you've become. Maybe that means taking things slow. Maybe that means rebuilding trust. Maybe that means letting them show effort over time. Maybe that means no longer being the emotional anchor. Or maybe it means walking away entirely, not as punishment, but as closure. Because by the time they finally show up, you might already be living a life that doesn't leave space for half love. You might be surrounded by people who pour into you, people who match your energy, people who choose you without needing a wake-up call. Love stops feeling like a fight. It becomes flow. And when you taste that, you don't crave uncertainty anymore. Their return becomes a message, not a destination, a reminder of how far you've come, not a reason to go back. And here's the truth. If they only show up when you stop trying, they may not be choosing you. They may be choosing not to lose the comfort you provided. There's a difference between I want you and I want access to you. There's a difference between I love you and I miss how you made me feel. One seeks connection, the other seeks comfort, and you deserve the first. So when your absence finally speaks louder than your effort, don't just listen to them. Listen to yourself. Ask, does their return align with my healing? Does their presence feel safe now? Does their effort match the depth of what we lost? Do they love me with clarity, not convenience? Because people can come back with emotions, but emotions alone don't sustain relationships. Consistency does. Accountability does. Changed behavior does. Love isn't proven in missing you. It's proven in showing up for you. And if they can finally do that, beautiful. If they can't, walk forward with grace. Because stepping back was never about punishing them. It was about discovering you. Your power wasn't in making them realize how much they care. Your power was in realizing you no longer needed to prove you were worth caring about. And now you stand differently, not softer, not colder, just clearer. You know what reciprocity feels like. You know what effort looks like. You know what you bring to someone's life. You know you are not replaceable. You are not optional. You are not background comfort. You are someone whose presence transforms people and whose absence reveals truth. So if they're ready now, let them rise to meet you. And if they're not, let them go with love. Because love should be mutual. Energy should be matched. Connection should move both ways. You're not just waiting to be chosen anymore. You're choosing to. And that is the moment everything changes. If this hits something real, don't just keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs the reminder. And if you want more videos like this, you already know what to do. Stick around, and I'll meet you in the next one.